The Blue Ridge Mountains have a sound to them if you're quiet enough to listen, a low hum, almost like the earth breathing. On that morning, the forest was still. Dew clung to the pine needles, glittering in the early sunlight. The cool air stung my lungs as I breathed deep, taking in the smell of wet leaves and wood smoke. This was why I bought the place: 5 acres, a cabin, and a stretch of gravel road no one but me ever bothered to drive. My nearest neighbor was half a mile away, and that was just fine with me. But as I crested the last hill, the peace I'd come to expect shattered. Down at the gate, blocking my entrance, sat a shiny black SUV with chrome accents so polished they caught the morning sun like a mirror. 2 people stood outside it, clipboards in hand, chatting casually as though they belonged there. I froze, every muscle in my body tensing. Visitors this early never meant anything good. The taller one turned at the sound of my boots crunching over gravel. She was in her late 30s, dark hair pulled into a neat bun, wearing a tailored navy blazer that looked wildly out of place on this mountain road. She smiled brightly, like she'd just found exactly the person she'd been looking for. "Mr. Parker," she called, taking a step forward. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I let my eyes sweep the scene: the open SUV door, the clipboard, the man beside her wearing a bright red polo with a gold HOA logo stitched over the heart. HOA. My gut twisted. "Yeah," I finally said. "That's me." The woman's smile widened. "I'm Allison Reed, with Mountain Ridge Realty. The HOA invited me out to do a preliminary walkthrough of your property. You have such a hidden gem up here. Perfect for the fall market. Buyers are already lining up." I stared at her, her words sinking in like rain soaking into dry ground. "Walkthrough?" I repeated. "Yes," she said, glancing at her clipboard. "It's a standard courtesy visit before we list a property." "My property isn't listed," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. The man in the HOA polo stepped forward now, smiling like he was about to deliver some kind of neighborly wisdom. His name was Charles Winters, HOA president, self-appointed king of Cedar Glen. I'd seen him at exactly 2 board meetings, both of which I regretted attending. "Technically, Nathan," he began, using my first name like we were old friends, "every property in the Cedar Glen community is considered part of the association portfolio. We just want to keep neighborhood values up. Your cabin could really boost comps if it sold right now." I felt my jaw tighten. "You invited a realtor onto my property," I said slowly, "without asking me?" Charles chuckled, but there was no real humor in it. "Don't take it the wrong way. We just thought you'd appreciate someone showing you what your place could be worth. You could make a fortune." I took another step closer to the gate, feeling the anger climb up my spine. "No," I said flatly. "I wouldn't appreciate that. This is my home. My land. I'm not selling." Allison's smile faltered, just slightly. "Sir, I completely understand. But you should know, properties like yours are in very high demand right now. If you list before October, you could." I cut her off, my voice low and steady. "Not for sale." Charles's smile vanished altogether. "You're being unreasonable, Nathan. The HOA has rights here. You signed the agreement when you bought the lot." "I signed for road maintenance," I snapped. "That's it. You have no authority to invite strangers onto my land. You try this again, and I will call the sheriff." For a moment, no one spoke. The only sound was the soft ticking of the SUV's engine and the wind rustling the leaves. Then I reached for the gate. The heavy chain I'd installed months ago was looped through the bars, the padlock hanging loose. I snapped it shut with a loud metallic clink, the sound ringing down the empty road like a gunshot. Both of them flinched. "Tour's over," I said. Allison glanced at Charles, then back at me. "Mr. Parker, you don't have to." "Yes, I do," I said. Charles's face hardened into something colder. "This isn't how we do things here," he said. "Then maybe you shouldn't have come uninvited," I said, stepping forward until I stood almost nose to nose with him, only the gate between us. "Nobody sets foot past this point without my say-so. Not you. Not her. Not anyone. He held my stare for a long moment, then turned on his heel and stalked back to the SUV. Allison hesitated, looking like she wanted to say something more, but finally followed. I watched them climb into the vehicle and slam the doors. Gravel sprayed as the SUV reversed, turned, and drove back down the mountain road until it disappeared around the bend. I stood there a long time after they left, one hand still gripping the gate, my breath coming hard. The forest was quiet again, but it didn't feel like peace anymore. It felt like the calm before a storm. The next morning, I woke to the sound of crows calling from the treeline. The sun had barely risen, but I was already on edge, replaying yesterday's scene at the gate. Charles's smug face. Allison's forced smile. The SUV's tires throwing gravel as it sped away. They'd be back. The thought was as clear as the frost on my windows. I brewed a pot of coffee, the rich smell filling the cabin, and sat at the kitchen table staring out at the pines. I'd come here to get away from all that city politics, nosy neighbors, rules about what color your mailbox can be. I hadn't moved to the mountains just to let a homeowners association turn my land into another piece of their portfolio. By the time the mug was empty, I knew what I had to do. I drove into town that morning, my old truck rattling over every pothole on the county road. The hardware store owner, Jim Holloway, raised an eyebrow when he saw me walk in. "Morning, Nate," he said. "What's got you looking like a man about to dig a moat?" "Not a moat," I said, grabbing a bright red metal sign from the shelf. "Private property, entry by permission only. Trespassers will be prosecuted." I grabbed another smaller one that simply read, "No trespassing." Jim leaned against the counter, watching me load up on padlocks, galvanized chain, and a set of trail cameras. "Trouble?" "HOA trouble," I said flatly. He whistled low. "Ah. Say no more." By the time I got back up the mountain, the sun was high and the fog had burned off. I worked in silence, bolting the new sign to the gatepost, tightening the chain until it was snug, and positioning the cameras in the trees so they'd catch anyone trying to slip by on foot. Sweat ran down my back, but I didn't stop until I was satisfied. When I stepped back, the gate no longer looked like just a gate. It looked like a line in the sand. 3 days later, Charles came back, this time with backup. I saw them from my porch first, 3 men standing just outside the gate, their HOA polos bright red against the green of the forest. One of them, I recognized, Greg, the board treasurer. The third man was younger, someone I'd never seen before, arms folded tight across his chest. I walked down slow, letting the gravel crunch beneath my boots. "Well," I said when I reached the gate, "this looks official." Charles's expression was tight, all pretense of friendliness gone. "Nathan, this has gone far enough. You can't just lock the community out of shared access." "Shared access?" I said, gripping the chain-link fence with one hand. "Charles, you know damn well my parcel is in common ground. I've got the deed that proves it." Greg shifted uncomfortably. "Look, we're just trying to keep the neighborhood values high. When a property looks like it's..." "Stop." My voice came out sharper than I intended. "This isn't about values. This is about control. You don't get to send realtors up here like you own the place." The younger man, the one I didn't know, stepped forward. "You're being paranoid, old man. They were just trying to help." I turned slowly to face him. "You step 1 foot past this gate, son, and you'll find out just how paranoid I can be." For a moment, no one moved. The forest was dead silent, like even the birds had stopped to watch. Finally, Charles let out a slow breath. "Nathan, this isn't how neighbors act. We can take this to the board." "Take it wherever you want," I said. "You show up uninvited again, I call the sheriff. And next time, I won't just be standing on this side of the gate waiting for you." I let the words hang there. Greg cleared his throat. "Let's go," he muttered, tugging at Charles's arm. They left without another word, but I could feel Charles's eyes burning holes in me until they turned the bend and were gone. That night, I didn't sleep much. The moonlight cut sharp across the cabin floor, and every creak of the old timbers had me glancing at the door. If the HOA wanted to play games, I was going to make sure they knew whose rules we were playing by. Just after midnight, I grabbed an old wooden post from my shed and carried it down to the gate. The air was cold enough that my breath fogged, but I didn't care. I planted the post, hammered it solid, and nailed up a hand-painted sign I'd made earlier. Welcome to the Parker Preserve. All visitors must follow posted rules. Beneath it, I tacked a sheet of paper with a list I'd scrawled in thick black marker. Rules. No entry without written permission. No photography allowed. No value assessments or appraisals permitted. All HOA communication must be mailed, not delivered in person. I stood back, admiring my work under the cold glow of the moon. It was petty, sure, maybe even a little theatrical, but out here, sometimes you had to speak in a language people understood. And my language was clear, this was my land. The next morning, I was on the porch with a cup of coffee when I heard the distant hum of a car engine. A sedan crested the hill, slowed as it approached the gate, then stopped entirely. I watched from above as the driver leaned out, read the new sign, and shook their head before reversing slowly back down the road. I smiled into my coffee. For the first time in days, I felt like I was breathing easy again. But I also knew this wasn't over. The HOA would be back, and next time, they wouldn't come with clipboards and smiles. They'd come to win. And I'd be ready for them. The knock came on a Wednesday afternoon, heavy, official, and far too polite to belong to a neighbor. I set down the wrench I'd been using to tighten the gate's new crossbar and wiped the sweat from my forehead. Through the pines, I could see a shape just past the bend of the driveway, a vehicle. The sound of its idling engine floated through the stillness of the forest. I grabbed my cap, slid it on, and walked slowly down the road, gravel crunching under my boots. By the time I reached the gate, the picture came into view, a county sheriff's cruiser, its lights off but unmistakable, parked just outside. And standing next to it, arms crossed, chin raised like a man who thought he had finally cornered his prey, was Charles Winters. His red HOA polo looked freshly pressed, his expression smug. A deputy stepped out from the cruiser as I approached, resting one hand casually on his duty belt. "Afternoon, sir," he said, tone neutral but guarded. "You Nathan Parker?" "That's me," I said, leaning against the gate. "What's this about?" Charles spoke before the deputy could. "It's about unlawful restriction of community access," he said, his voice clipped. "Nathan's blocking HOA representatives from performing their duties. He can't just wall off his property like some." The deputy held up a hand. "Let's keep this civil, Mr. Winters." He turned back to me. "You mind if we talk?" "Not at all," I said. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a weathered folder, the one I'd been keeping by the door ever since the first confrontation. Inside were copies of my deed, my parcel survey, and a signed letter from the county zoning office verifying that my land was fully private, with no shared easements. I slid the papers through the gap in the gate, one by one, until the deputy had them all. "I own every inch past this gate," I said quietly. "There's no shared access road here, no community right-of-way. If anyone steps foot past this point without my consent, they're trespassing." The deputy took his time reading through the documents, flipping each page carefully. I kept my eyes on Charles. He was pacing now, muttering under his breath. "This is ridiculous. He's a danger to the whole neighborhood. You can't just let people build little fiefdoms up here." "Charles," I said, loud enough to cut him off, "you don't live up here. You live in a subdivision with lawns so perfect they look spray-painted. Don't come up my mountain and tell me how to live." The deputy looked up from the papers, expression unreadable. "Well," he said finally, handing the folder back through the gate, "everything looks in order. Mr. Parker's within his rights to secure his property." I saw the moment the words landed on Charles, like a punch to the gut. "You're siding with him," he snapped. "I'm siding with the law," the deputy said evenly. "If you believe there's a legal dispute, you're welcome to take it to civil court. But as of right now, you step past that gate without permission, you're trespassing. And that means I'll have to arrest you." For a heartbeat, the forest was silent. No wind, no birds. Just the three of us standing there, the tension so thick it felt like it had weight. Charles's face turned crimson. His jaw worked like he was chewing something bitter, and for a second, I thought he might try to cross the gate just to prove a point. But then he turned on his heel, muttering something I couldn't catch, and stalked back to his SUV. The deputy gave me a small nod before following him, climbing back into the cruiser. As the two vehicles pulled away, I stood at the gate, my hands gripping the chain link so tight my knuckles turned white. I'd won. But my chest felt hollow, like all the anger and tension that had been holding me upright these past few weeks had drained out in an instant. That night, I sat on the porch with a glass of bourbon, the stars scattered thick across the sky. For the first time since this mess began, the mountain was quiet again. No HOA cars creeping up the road. No clipboards. No arguments echoing in my head. I realized then that this fight hadn't just been about property lines. It had been about something deeper, about carving out a place where the noise of the world couldn't touch me. About holding on to the last bit of peace I'd managed to find. I thought about my dad, who used to tell me when I was a kid that a man needs a corner of the world that's just his. I hadn't understood it then. I did now. The next morning, under a pale autumn sun, I grabbed a can of white paint and walked down to the gate one last time. Beneath the "Welcome to the Parker Preserve" sign, I painted a fifth rule in careful block letters. Rule number 5, respect the quiet. When I finished, I stepped back and looked at it. It wasn't just a warning to trespassers. It was a promise to myself. I locked the gate, turned, and started back up the road toward the cabin. Behind me, the forest was still. The wind whispered through the pines, and somewhere far off, a hawk cried out. For the first time in months, the sound didn't feel like a warning. It felt like freedom.